Aloha and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books off the shelf, blow the dust off them, and remind ourselves why it is we love them so. My name's Tom Galley, and joining me today we've got Tony Pasculi.
Thanks for having me.
And today we are going back to one of my favorites. This is late grade school and early high school for me. Patrick McManus, A Fine and Pleasant Misery.
Yeah, and as always, why this book? No, not why this book. Why is this book a favorite?
You know, there's, in reading through this, so many memories come flooding back, both of the book itself and the shared experience. My best friend and I, and Tim Parker, during that point in my life, we used to do this. We used to go out camping, with minimalist equipment, the sort of thing where we would grab a blanket and a 2x4 and sawhorses and call it a tent. Go out in the woods. His family had a horse farm, so we'd just go out to the back pasture or just in the woods on the other side of the pasture, for our and so much of this just resonates. I mean, McManus is a much more humorous writer, and he exaggerates the details and puts them together in ways that, never really coalesce. But the idea of it, this idea that we were voluntarily doing this stuff to ourselves and calling it fun, just really resonated.
But you have fond memories of it. So in what sense was it not fun?
The same sort of sense that you can look back on a story about being sick and find humor in it. When at the time all you were was sick. It's like when we went on that vacation, I spent the entire week in the hotel room with diarrhea. Right? That was not fun at the time, but later on when you're trotting the story out, you can find amusement in the story.
All right.
Right. So, sleeping or lying on the bumpy ground, wrapped in a blanket, with rocks in your back and bugs crawling on you and freezing. At the time, you did not say, wow, what a great time I'm having.
So you did not have actual fun.
Well, there was actual fun as well, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It wasn't unconditional misery, but we played soldier in the woods, and getting the fire going and our attempts at cooking, whatever we had taken to pass for food.
There's something about being a certain age. When you're young, every new experience is a new experience. It's indelible, it's striking, it's colorful. And that's something you lose as you get older because you have so many other experiences to slot it into and compare it to. It's hard for something to be, as mind-blowing as when you were 10, when you're 50. It's just really hard to blow your mind when you're 50.
This is true.
And if something does happen that blows your mind when you're 50, that's usually bad, yeah. I definitely, I connected with this book a lot too for the similar reasons. Question, because I don't know the answer to this, where did you grow up?
Louisiana, rural Louisiana, North Central.
Okay, yeah. So I definitely expected you to grow up somewhere rural because this is just, if you had an opportunity to hunt and camp and fish. Did you hunt at all when you were a kid?
I did a bit of hunting. Well, I did a bit of walking around in the woods with a gun.
I did some of that, only with a BB gun though, never with a real gun. Never went deer hunting, had an opportunity to, declined.
Went deer hunting a few times, never, well, from my perspective, never successfully. From the deer's perspective, I'm sure it was, successful events.
That is one of my favorite stories in this collection, is the one where he talks about the deer hunting. And he goes on and on and on about what it means to be a yup or a nope. Mm-hmm. Do you have your first deer or do you not? And he goes out deer hunting and doesn't bag a deer, but still becomes in his mind a yup because of the experience.
Yep, the hunt was the experience, exactly. not the culmination, but the journey was the payoff.
The journey is its own reward. Yeah, that was wonderful. That was a wonderful story. Several of these stories I really enjoyed. However, and this is where you came to this book, I think, at an earlier age than I did, and also you have a different sensibility about humor than I think I do. So when we read Douglas Adams, you really like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I really like Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. And this reminds me very much of Hitchhiker's Guide.
It did. There's a lot of the similar humor there, and the turns of phrase are also delightful.
Yeah.
And I think I said when we were talking about hitchhikers, you could open the book to any random page, pick a random paragraph, and start reading, and it would be something that was delightful. And I feel the same way about this. Any given sentence, any given paragraph you pick out is going to be a gem for some reason.
I would say any given page you pick out or paragraph, there's going to be some humor on it, but the humor for me got in the way of the storytelling a lot of the time. It was like, I don't need that. And the thing is, he's so funny at other times. There's humor that comes out of character. There's humor that comes out of situation that is just absolutely delightful and sparkles. And then he'll throw in a needless comparison to the size of a thing being as big as an elephant. And just like, it's pretty tired joke. And I would have, we're talking about editing. We're talking about editing last time. I would have edited out about half of the humor in this book and enjoyed it twice as much, I think. Yeah.
Well, that's fair enough. I did not remember when I picked this. Again, I probably haven't touched this since my sophomore year in high school.
Yeah.
I did not remember it being as fragmented as it was. In my mind, it was like 2 or 3 novellas crammed together in a book.
Interesting.
And
yeah.
it's actually just a series. These could have run as columns, in a Sportsman's Guide or something like that.
I believe they did. Yeah.
You think they were originally columns? They certainly kind of feel like it.
I read the introduction, and I believe that's where they come from. He wrote a column for a magazine.
I thought that was, they definitely talked about the fact he was a columnist, but I didn't know if these were the columns or if that was just
Field and Stream.
Field and Stream.
Yeah, straight up Field and Stream. Damn.
Yep, there we go.
We had Field and Stream laying around when I was a kid, but I don't remember ever reading Patrick McManus. Huh. Funny.
I wonder if that's where I was introduced to him, huh?
Could be.
We didn't have it around the house, but I was certainly friends with lots of people who did.
Yeah.
Now, he shares a trait with Stephen King, an unfortunate trait with Stephen King, in that he can't end his stories. So I don't know how many there are in here, but I would say that 2/3 of them suffer from lack of ending.
Yeah,
and
some of them
Stephen
I think
King
he
is
really
much like
nails
that.
the ending, like the one about the hunting.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, yeah. And I think this is I again would blame the humor for this. It's like you throw a lot of humor, you sprinkle a lot of humor on something. It's like throwing a lot of sugar on there, and you don't notice there's no nutritional value. And and the sad thing about that is that I think he's actually a very good writer, and he's got some great insight into that outdoor experience, and particularly that nostalgia of the outdoor experience for your youth, and because he's making these things so delightful and funny to read, no one's pushing back on this.
Mm-hmm.
And because he's succeeding at it, he's not digging in himself. And I would love to see this writer kind of ditch that crutch and really dig into that experience. And I think he's really onto something here. The way, again, like Stephen King, at moments you just go, oh my God, this guy can write. He just digs into an experience and nails it so beautifully. And then he goes off on some weird tangent.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So coming to this for the first time at 59, not having read it in high school, and a lot of this humor is kind of dated too. It's sort of a humorous style, which is very Douglas Adams or Dave Barry even, humor for humor's sake. A lot of that was kind of like, But some of these stories were still wonderful, and some of these stories brought me back to my childhood. Fishing in the crick. Yeah,
There's a definite difference between a crick and a creek, and it's nice to see that articulated and brought out in print like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember this being just so much fun. And again, we would share the stories as they related to our experiences. Mm-hmm. There's a story he does about backpacking, which I was convinced was in this book, but is not. But he talks about he goes on about the backpacks 2 or 3 times, the oversized over everything. Mm-hmm. But there's a technique for descending a mountain called the whip slam, where as you're near the top of the mountain, you lose your footing, and your backpack whips you around, and then you slam into the side of the mountain, and you proceed to whip slam your way back down to where you started from. But that didn't make it. That's in a different McManus book somewhere.
That's a shame.
Looking at Amazon, I had no real idea of how many of these he had written. So
he has several collections, and this collection has like 20 stories in it. So and they are. I think that's another thing that holds these back from being better than they could be, is that their column length. And
I kind of, I was complaining about the lack of ending. I wonder if some of that's a word count issue. If you're sitting at the typewriter, I'm sure at the time, merrily writing along, and then suddenly realizing, I've got 2 inches, and I've still not done with the story. Yeah.
Yeah, but some of these turns of phrase, like you were saying, are just wonderful. So I highlighted some that I really enjoyed. He's talking about how he's going camping as a kid and how you have to bring a machete. The machete was needed anytime you had to slash out your own trail. This necessity arose more often than a person who is not a kid with a machete might think.
He talks about the lengths to which you have to travel to find a place in need of a trail.
Yeah.
And their most successful trail, which became a clothesline.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
If you've ever tried, those of you that haven't, if you've ever tried to hack a trail with a machete, it is exhausting.
Yeah.
If you're actually somewhere that needs hacking, if you move forward a foot, you probably spent 500 calories.
Yeah.
And you have blisters at this point. It's absurd what you see in movies where people just kind of swinging and walking. But yeah, for a child, that was what it was all about.
I had an image of what that was supposed to be like, and I went out looking for trails to do that on, and it's just like, yeah, it's not worth the effort. All you can really do with a machete on a trail is if there's a branch which is blocking the trail and there's several people behind you who are going to have to negotiate that branch, you can hack it down and toss it aside and make life marginally easier for everyone behind you.
Yep.
But if there's two of you, it's just not worth it. Yeah. So.
Except when it is the point.
Yeah, except when it is the point, yes.
I have a machete, I must hack.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were just, I ended up not highlighting, I started out and I was just highlighting every third sentence. It's like, okay, this is never going to work. So I ended up not highlighting anything or taking notes on it, but just kind of just enjoying revisiting this.
Yeah.
And being reintroduced to Rancid Crabtree, Strange the dog. Who was the Army surplus store?
Grogan's.
Yeah.
Yeah, Army surplus stores are amazing. I spent a lot of time in an Army surplus store when I was a kid too. Just like
we had to travel quite a ways to get to an Army surplus store. The nearest one, the closest one was in Shreveport. So it was about an hour and a half from our house.
Oh wow! So that made it quite an adventure then.
Yeah, so it was something to be looked forward to. It was the sort of thing that once we got into high school and we were 15 and old enough to drive. Oh my God, can you imagine? But yeah, 15 and old enough to drive. We would, Tim and I would. He had this little yellow Chevy pickup. That he called T-Bone, but it was literally as wide as two teenage boys sitting shoulder to shoulder, right, with a stick shift jammed in between us. And we would drive up to Shreveport to root around in the Army surplus store with $12 in our pocket.
There's something about my Army surplus store was not technically speaking an Army surplus store. It was just a discount store that had all kinds of crap in it, like a combination between a dollar store, and they had a bunch of Army surplus stuff that they would get and stick on the shelves. Yeah, because they were just moving anything they would sell. But it was fun enough. Yeah. But there's something about an Army surplus store. Like, I will still drive out to Sand Island when I'm directing a play that's set anywhere near sort of a military theme, and just look for costumes and props, and it's just fun environment to be in.
It's a fun environment. It has a unique smell, that rotting canvas smell.
Yeah. And there's just always stuff you want to buy, and it's like, I do not need this for the play. Well, how can I force this into the play so I have an excuse to buy it? Yeah,
it's only $10.
Yeah,
I need this. Yeah,
I still have a wooden ammo box that I got for Henry V. And my justification was they're going to carry their bows and arrows in this big, heavy box. Yeah, no, it's ridiculous. But I wanted that box. Still have it.
Yeah, I made an end table that I use for my reading lamp at night out of a wooden ammo box.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So how much of the fun of revisiting this was revisiting the particular columns and McManus's writing, and how much of it was revisiting the past that it reminds you of?
I would split it, I was going to say right down the middle, but I don't think that's accurate. I'm going to go out on a limb and say maybe 2/3 of it was the feeling of nostalgia that it brought up, and maybe 1/3 of it was the humor itself.
All right. Honestly, I like to hear that, because I think that's one of the great things that we underestimate about rereading a favorite book is how much it transports you back in time to when you first read that and who you were, and it just comes with a flood of associated memories, and that's incredible. Yeah. So.
And there definitely, there are some places I'm reading and I'm chuckling aloud because the phrasing is so clever. The thing about the cows and the fishing stream. That whole thing had me in stitches. I never really fished as a kid, but I had other experiences that
you didn't fish as a kid.
It was just not something that we did. Yeah.
Did you not have cricks and lakes?
We had cricks, we had lakes, but there were other things that one could do to enjoy a crick in a lake.
Okay.
Yeah. Splashing around and paddling through, and occasionally, if you were really bold, swimming in.
Yeah.
Lake swimming is sketchy at best. But
Yeah. I did a lot of fishing as a kid, and I have great memories of that. There was a big creek, Bishop Creek, ran through our town, and it was shallow enough that you could just wade through it. It was like, I don't know, a foot deep, maybe deeper in places. You could go rock hopping in it. You could catch your own bait there. We would catch mayfly nymphs. Just turn over a rock and grab a really fresh mayfly nymph. It was excellent bait. And pull trout out of the stream and cook it for dinner. It was great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was not my experience. But yeah, stomping through the woods with a shotgun, hoping for squirrels or rabbits, or
I never
did a lot of that. Wasn't all that terribly successful. Probably the stomping through part was not the right way to go about it. But at the time, what did I know?
He has a great quote about that, which I highlighted. So he talks about how what was he going to say?
Is this the one about how to fish a crick?
No. So he talks about his dog, Strange, who made slightly less noise going through the woods than an armored division through a bamboo jungle. Nevertheless, we usually managed to get a few birds, apparently because they thought that anything that made that much noise couldn't possibly be hunting.
Yep.
That is fun. Yeah. So that's actually a great example of the first sentence of that is a little bit of humor that I don't like, comparing the dog and his noise to an armored division. I think it's not necessary. It's just, and it's sort of hyperbole that he leans on a lot. But the second thing, the observational humor and the anthropomorphization of the bird, saying, "Oh yeah, they're making so much noise, they can't possibly be hunters."
Right.
That is hilarious to me. Yeah, and he does both of those things, and he just he jams them together. So
Well, maybe he's figuring half of his audience will like one joke and half will like the other. I don't know.
Sure, yeah. Shakespeare did the same thing. Shakespeare was like, "You want high humor? You want clever puns and allusions? I got those. You want fart jokes? I got those too." Yeah. I will play to the gallimaufry. Yep.
Yeah, but that's the same technique as he describes in fishing in a creek. You have to have enough weight on your thing so it makes a genuine splash when you cast it, and the fish just think you're dumping garbage into the river, not that you're out there fishing.
Yeah.
Model Ts and old tires.
My favorite passage in this whole book is he talking about the river rafting expedition. And everyone's warning them about the Narrows, and they go through the Narrows very early on. It's like, that wasn't so bad. What were they warning us about? And they decide to continue on at night. Mm-hmm. And then that means that they are half asleep and in the dark when they encounter the real Narrows. And we get this great paragraph. I will not attempt to tell what shooting the Narrows in the middle of the night was like, about the paddles snapping in our hands like matchsticks, about the river wrapping the raft around us like dough around 3 frightened wieners. Blah, blah, blah. The part where the raft was on top of us and the river was on top of the raft.
Yep.
I love that.
Yep, he's got a lot of good writing in there.
He really does.
Yep.
He really does.
And there's, like you say, the parallels between what he does and what Douglas Adams does are just striking, the way they paint with language.
So, question, did he ever write anything other than columns? Did he ever attempt a longer form piece?
Well, looking through Amazon, the books that popped up at the top of the list anyway were all collections. So I don't know that he didn't, but it wasn't like in the top 10 things that people buy by Patrick McManus. So
okay,
I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's not known for his long form if it exists.
He, if you got a full-time job as a columnist and you're banging out, monthly columns, maybe you don't have time to do anything else. Although he did say he aspires to be an idler.
Yep.
Yeah, and succeeded in that. Yeah, he was taking lessons in idleness from
Rancid Crabtree.
Rancid Crabtree, and didn't realize until he was 30 years old that Rancid had successfully instructed him.
Yep.
Yeah.
The short one on the care and feeding of an old man, that was delightful.
That was very That was very sentimental. Yeah, and just lovely. Yes. Yeah, you got to have as a young boy, you got to have an old man in your life, and maybe it's your dad, but maybe your dad doesn't have time to be your old man, so you borrow an old man from someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Greatest day in his life when his best friend moved away and he got to have his old man
His
just
best
to
friend's
himself.
old man, yeah.
Yeah.
So many good things, so many gems in there, And again, they're if I was reading this for the first time, I think I would find some joy in it. But again, with the, remembering how just stunningly hilarious it was at the time, and the shared memories of discovering this with a good friend, and the shared experiences that Patrick McManus is describing for us, but better than we could ever describe ourselves.
Yeah. It was a fun read. I enjoyed it, and I got a lot out of it. So yeah, stylistically not completely in line with my taste, but that's okay.
It's very divergent from other things that we've done in the podcast so far.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to diverge some more. Yeah.
Are we?
Yeah, we are. Yeah. I don't know if we're at that stage yet. We still have more to say about this book?
You know what? I'm actually good. Like I said, I actually didn't take any notes or highlight anything.
All right.
I just really am glad that I went back and read this one again. This was the sort of feeling I was hoping when I came up with the idea for the podcast.
Well, then I think you nailed it. I think this is exactly what revisiting a favorite book should be like. And we do a lot of critique of these books and how they stand up and how they hold up, 20, 30, 40 years later. But that's not the point of a favorite book.
No.
You can enjoy a favorite book. You don't have to pass it on to someone else. You don't have to share it with the world or defend it against anyone else's opinion. A favorite is a favorite, and you can just enjoy it and revel in the pleasure that it brings you.
Indeed.
So, yes. So well done. All right. So next.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this. What?
Next, we're going to be reading a book called Appaloosa by Robert B. Parker, which is a frickin' Western. And it's a little bit of a cheat because I don't think it's 20 years old, which has been my sort of arbitrary cutoff point for what makes something yesterday. I've been trying to stick to books 20 years old or older. But I picked this book because Robert B. Parker is probably one of my favorite authors of all time. And there's a lot of books that are considerably older. They're 40 years old, and I've read all of them, but I don't think any of them are a good entry point for you.
Okay.
I think starting with the first Spencer novel would be very disappointing. Starting with something in the middle would be ridiculous. But this is a kind of a classic Parker book that shares a lot of qualities with his earlier books, except that it's not a detective novel, it's a Western.
All right.
But thematically, it's very much in line with his other work.
I don't know when the last time I picked up a Western was. So
I am not a
forward to that
Western
now.
reader myself. I read this one because it's by Robert B. Parker. Yeah.
All right. Well, looking forward to that then.
All right. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.